Welcome to the 12-Step Big Book Workshop. My name is Lisa, and I am a student of the 12 Steps Method of Recovery. My focus fellowships are CODA, Al-Anon, and OA, and many others. I am so happy to be back with you for another fantastic opportunity to take a look at our sixth step. For reference, this is normally recorded during the actual live workshop, but the recording did not come out of Zoom, so I'm just recreating it so there will not be any participation at the end from the people in the room. So please join me in the set-aside prayer with the willingness and the desire to have an open mind and open heart with the gift of patience as we apply our sixth step. So please join me in the set-aside prayer with the willingness and the desire to have an open mind and an open heart with the gift of patience as we apply our sixth step. God, please set aside everything I think I know about myself, my step 6, and my honesty, so that I may have a new experience with my attitude, my obstacles, my fears, and especially with you. So we move along to step 6 tonight, and it begins on page 72 if you want to follow along in your book. We will be talking about step 6, but that does not mean that you have to be on step 6. Just follow along with where we are at, and in your spare time, go back to where you need to be. But because this is a continuum, it's okay wherever you are and whatever you're learning. At least you're learning something. Wherever you're at, just learn what's happening right there. And give yourselves credit for sticking this journey out and facing what others don't often have the courage to do. This is not simple work. It's very involved. And I have to ask, are you entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character that we're about to look at? We need to ask that question. So in looking at step 6, we look at the removal of obstacles as we have come to the realization that they are a source of unlimited power and that I can have access to this power through my faith. These 3 steps, 5, 6, and 7, are all about our relationship with our concept about a higher power that surpasses beyond our desire to be in control of everything. Bill W. didn't require belief in a traditional God. He stressed an open mind for a higher power, which needs to be anything greater than oneself. It could include nature, something in nature, your AA group, or whatever group you're in. And that allows the atheists and agnostics to find power through God as we understood him, to achieve sobriety, emphasizing surrender of self-reliance for recovery to an unseeable source of power. On our own power, we didn't get very far, so it's time to try another source. Back on page 25, Bill said we are rocketed into the 4th dimension. We climb on board the rocket in step 1, and it brings us where it is going, the destination, which is to be in continual orbit around the source, that supreme light that overcomes all darkness. And now we are in the 2nd stage of removing the obstacles, the shortcomings in us that are blocking out the sunlight of the spirit that resides in all of us. We made this decision about higher power back in step 2. And if you're still struggling with that decision and you can't quite commit, go back and read it again and do some discovery in what you believe is your higher power. And we have purposely and consciously decided that there is a powerful energy that resides in all human beings. And the good news is we can choose to have a relationship with it. It is an energy that supports but does not control or direct our decisions. This turning was accomplished when we made our decisions in steps 2 and 3 as to whether God is or God isn't, and what that means to us personally. If we come to this program and we believe God is nothing, and then we see that there is something that's a higher power out there, it's obvious that it becomes everything. So that's the concept of God is nothing or God is everything. With step 2 and 3, we began the journey of truth and transparency, or, as Bill says, we entered into a very long gauntlet. We are delivered from childish behaviors to adult maturity in step 4 as a passage of rite, and we will continue this discovery process through step 7 as we establish healthy relationships with ourselves. So we stepped outside of the box of the literal instructions in the big book in every instance to honor what Bill W. and many after him likely meant with their interpretation, which leads us to the gift of freedom. On page 62, Bill is very clear regarding unmanageability and how powerless we are back in step 1, and at the very least about our addiction. This is the presenting problem and the reason most of us are in this workshop. Our addictions, which are a form of repetitive behavior over which we have no control. This then leads to negative results and consequences of our substance and process addiction lifestyles. And after exhausting every other avenue in self-help and therapy, we make the decision to commit to an unseeable source of supportive power resources. This was our decision of faith. In all of the step 4 processes, this was, again and again, reinforced in the big book. We identified resentments, analyzed them, and talked about them, telling our story, and still we couldn't remove the deep ones, so we prayed for their removal. Then we moved forward to our fears. We found that we could write about and analyze our fears. We unpacked them, and some created vision statements, and we did the turnarounds like Byron Katie demonstrates. A lot of work, but in the end, the big book says to pray for the fear's removal, not unlike the sex inventory, where Bill said, pretty much the same as the fear. We can do all things but on our own. We can't even create principles to give us guidance and healthy principles. If we are successful creating healthy principles, we will still need that power and to allow those principles to be our foundation in our life. We pray for the knowledge. What should I have done instead? Once we have discovered our principles, we pray for the power to incorporate them effectively into our lives and to carry them out. Dishonesty and secrets have been linked to poor sexual behaviors, especially when those behaviors are a large hurdle to get over. In my own life, they were not connected. The lying and dishonesty was about my survival of my feared outcomes from the dysfunctional people and situations I was living in. There are a number of reasons why people in recovery behave dishonestly, including they fear the consequences of their actions and so lie to protect themselves from these consequences. Lying is a habit. The more people do it, the more they are likely to do it in the future. It is so easy to slip into the habit of lying until dishonesty becomes an almost automatic response. Dishonesty can produce desirable outcomes both socially and economically. There is therefore the temptation to use this as a gateway to fulfill desires. The problem is that the long-term consequences of dishonesty are almost always negative. And we addicts tend to eventually lie without even realizing it. This is because we are so self-deluded that we are unable to see the truth. Even when we give up alcohol and drugs or our process addictions, we can still become self-deluded again in the future, especially if we are doing this work alone. If people do not value honesty, then they will not put much effort into living a life that is built upon it. Therefore, it is vital that we have a clear understanding of the importance of honesty and the dangers of living with honesty in our recovery. On page 72, Bill says, having made our personal inventory, what shall we do about it? Well, The suggestion, not the rule, is to read our fifth step to somebody. This concept is about confessing our shortcomings, getting them out into the light. We don't want to make the mistake. We don't want to mistake the word confession with the religious concept of confessing or confessionals, although the end result is the same. Transparency is the emphasis and recovery is the goal. We make the commitment to peel the onion of all our discomfort, embarrassment, and stress, surrounded by the desire to not bring it out into the light because we fear abandonment, embarrassment, or worse. We bring the light and we shine it onto the darkness in step 5, an experience of deep healing through prayer and the act of saying it out loud. Many months or weeks later, we compile the information. The curtain we have been hiding behind reveals our delusions, illusions, and especially our unhealthy beliefs. After saying it out loud, after many years or decades, gives us an experience that we likely have never had before. We see the impact the unmanageability has had on our lives and the effect it has also had on other people around us. Again, the curtain we have been hiding behind gets pulled aside to observe our delusions and illusions, and our very unhealthy beliefs are revealed, and our dysfunctional motives are observed. The self-centeredness that Bill talks about on page 62 goes from black and white to technicolor in completing step 5. Bill W. said, "So our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. They arise out of ourselves, and the alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot, though he usually doesn't think so. Above everything, we alcoholics must be rid of this selfishness. We must, or it kills us." Bill talks about the spiritual arch through which we walk to a new freedom, which we have discussed prior to now, and it's on page 47. The spiritual arch that Bill talks about symbolizes the structure of recovery built through the 12 steps, representing a path to freedom from addiction, with the keystone being the simple yet profound decision to turn one's life over to a higher power, God as we understood him, in step 3. It is a metaphorical archway where each step builds towards spiritual transformation, culminating in walking through it as a free person at last. Bill implies that the foundation of a spiritual arch is realizing powerlessness in step 1 and gaining willingness to believe in a power greater than oneself. Step 2, he believed it forms the bedrock. It also has a cornerstone, and he calls that willingness. He doesn't call it specifically step 1, nor does he use the word defeat, but step 1 is thought of as that step that invites us and nearly demands a surrendering of the white flag, meaning I am defeated by my addiction. And then, less obviously and more intelligently, I am done in by my unmanageability. The cornerstone is placed on a foundation, and the stronger the foundation, the stronger the outcome. The cornerstone. We need to ask ourselves but one short question. Do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe, that there is a power greater than myself? Not a person, not a deity, not a religion, not a concept, a power. As soon as a man can say that he does believe, or is willing to believe, we emphatically assure him that he is on his way. It has been repeatedly proven among us that upon this simple cornerstone, a wonderfully effective spiritual structure can be built. It's in the big book, page 47. The stronger the cornerstone, the stronger the foundation. Obviously, the more stable the arch is. Willingness to name all of the even steps fundamental to their effectiveness is our willingness, Bill said. A willingness to believe, just the willingness, is that cornerstone. It's a huge concept. Then we see in step 3 the arch as the keystone, that important decision to turn from our self-centeredness, which we saw as our unmanageability, to other-centeredness, to have a holy relationship. Step 3 is the commitment, the decision to turn, the decision to have a relationship. But it is a commitment also to do this work, specifically meaning the next steps after 3, which are 4 through 9. So what was the point of step 4? In a word, freedom. From step 1 to step 9, we are building the spiritual arch that we will walk through to our freedom. And there, promises at the end of step 5 are, we can look the world in the eye. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. Our fears fall from us. We begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. We may have even had a certain spiritual beliefs, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience and eventually a spiritual awakening. On page 76, looking at step 6, it's about our character defects that we need to take a look at. There's not a lot of direction in the big book on this topic. If you highlighted the paragraph on page 76, you may have seen it says, if we can answer to our satisfaction, we then look to step 6. When he says answer, he's meaning the discovery of our shortcomings. Bill is referring to page 75. He says, carefully reading the first 5 proposals, we ask if we have omitted anything, for we are building an arch through which we shall walk a free man at last. So we ask ourselves, is our work solid so far? Are the stones properly in place? Have we skimped on the cement put into the foundation? Have we tried to make mortar without sand? It is a short answer. Have you consciously done this to your satisfaction? If you answer yes, then there is no need to dwell on or review your answers. You can just move on to step 6. On page 76, he says, so if you feel you have answered these questions thoroughly, you are ready to move forward to step 6, which is, we were entirely ready to have God remove all of these defects of character. So we can assume that we are surely willing to be ready, but don't miss that it says God or our higher power removes our character defects. We do not work on our character defects. We do make the list. We allow our higher power to do this. And we do this because we remember we are powerless. We are as powerless over our character defects as we are over our addictions. We have no choice in powerlessness. And step 6 is the acknowledgement that we have the defects and that we are powerless. Listing them or becoming aware that they exist does not mean we have the burden of doing something about them, other than, of course, praying for the removal. So when you're doing your list, the temptation is to be a good little student and make a really long list of character defects, but that's really not necessary, and it really defeats the purpose. We want to go with our top half dozen or a dozen character defects, because if you look at some of the lists, you can boil a lot of the character defects down to a few different major defects. And that's what you should work on. That will make things the most effective, and it will be the easiest way too, instead of trying to tackle hundreds of character defects. Keep it limited to no more than 12 or 15. In step 7, we ask God for removal, which we will discuss when we get there next week. So we make the list because we are willing to change and be changed. So we pray most humbly as we make our transparent list. On page 76 again, he says, We have emphasized willingness as being indispensable. Are we now ready to let God or a higher power remove from us all the things which we have admitted are objectionable? There is no direction in the Big Book, but it has been found that making a list of your character defects that you collected from your resentment, fear, and sex inventories, especially column 4, question number 9, just do a big dump from your heart and gut on the areas that you are exploring in yourselves. That will be sufficient. So we'll go back to your step 4 and step 5 notes. It's not about making a long list. It might take you a couple of hours total, maybe less. If it is more than that, you are spending too much time. I say this because I don't want you trying to make a long, unmanageable list. It isn't a rule, it is a suggestion. And now we are ready to let God remove from us all the things we have admitted to finding objectionable. It's possible that once you take a good look at your character defects and shortcomings, that on each one you pray and ask yourself if you are ready. Am I willing to have this removed? Do I see it as a shortcoming or do I see it as an asset? These are important questions. And over time, as we continually do our 12 steps, our character defects will change. It is not an asset if it turned into a liability, although I can't deny our liabilities will frequently become our best assets. Bill says in the book, because they engage our ability to be the wounded healer, to use our experience to have important communication with other people who have the same experiences. And then they get some hope as our healing allows them to commit to their own healing. We share our experience, strength, and hope, and it really helps the next person. Bill says, can he now take them all, every one? If we still cling to something, we will not let go. We ask God to help us be willing. Our higher power can remove them all, every one of them, and even do it without your consent. The 6th and 7th step don't talk about the specifics. They speak about God and the removal of our character defects. But ask yourself, do you honestly believe that your higher power will do that? And do you believe that they can? Write those 2 questions down because you might answer it off the top of your head thinking one thing, and then when you really look at it, you might find it's another answer. It's a rather immense question of faith, and it will help you to revisit steps 2 and 3 around this question if you are still struggling with your higher power, which is not unusual. If we are stuck on something that we can't let go of, we ask our higher power to help us be willing. To be willing is a major life-changing attitude in any area of our lives. Pray for the willingness, and if you have to ask to be willing, what could you possibly have to lose? So pray for willingness, or even pray for the willingness to be willing. In step 6, we look at our list we have made of specific character defects in order to develop the willingness to have our higher power remove them. Recognizing these flaws, such as fear, anger, and pride, fuel our addictions and prevent spiritual growth, thereby clearing the path for lasting recovery and self-improvement by accepting our own shortcomings without judgment. This is about acknowledging the rocks, the defects holding us down, so we can let them go. Not about instantly fixing them, but becoming ready for change. We're becoming completely different people. It's a process that we don't want to go too fast. It would put us in a constant spiral. So we do things as we can, and our progress and our process is individual. And what does drop the rock mean in recovery? So imagine you're swimming toward a boat called recovery. You're almost there, but something is pulling you under. That rock dragging you down is fear, resentment, anger, and self pity. The emotional weights you carry around in active addiction to help justify your actions. When you finally let go, you rise, you reach the boat, you begin to heal. That's the heart of Drop the Rock, a beloved metaphor in AA. It's more than a story, it's a call to release the burdens that keep you stuck. In steps 6 and 7, we are letting go of our character defects. You've probably felt it, the sting of regret, the grip of fear, the loop of self pity. These aren't just passing emotions, they're patterns that sabotage our recovery. Step 6 instructs us to become entirely ready to let go of these defects. In step 7, it invites you to humbly ask your higher power to remove them. But this isn't a one time fix. You don't wake up one morning free from your anger or fear. You grow by practicing these steps every day, by noticing when you've picked up those rocks again, and choosing to let them go, one moment and one day at a time. Step 10 helps keep us on alert to the subtle ways our character defects creep back in. Step 10 also helps us pause, reflect, and reset. It's our daily check in with ourselves and our recovery. When we stay honest about how we're showing up and how those rocks are manifesting, growth becomes inevitable. The whole point of this process is the deflation of the ego at depth. So we name them anger, fear, dishonesty, and the theory is that everybody has all three of these vital instincts. Some of us are anger based, some of us are fear based, and then some of us are shame based. That is our predominant instinct. But everybody has varying degrees of them all. These are survival instincts, and that is not at all a negative judgment because you have a dominant reaction to reality, anger or fear or shame. We observe it and name it, and we don't judge it. We evaluate it without condemnation. We approach the character defects inventory basically the same as we did the resentment and fear inventory. And my goal is to have a turnaround with my defects also. What am I defending? The first column would be where we list our defects and our behaviors. And the question that will help us plunge even deeper into the exact nature and the underlying source and cause. And the question is, what am I defending? This is about survival instincts. So I ask myself, what am I defending when I have this reaction that I define as a character defect? It's not just an inclination, it is the behavior. I don't just get fearful, I then speak fearfully, or I act fearful. It is a dance between the instinct and the behavior which creates the inclination. We then experience the lack of ability to contain it. So again, we ask, what is the benefit or payout for this reaction? And you might want to stop the video here and ask yourself this question. What is the benefit or payout for this reaction? Human beings don't do anything unless there's a benefit or payout for them. We're very self-centered. So you've got to ask yourself this question. Why am I defending it? Because as long as you defend it, you're not going to let it go. There is no right or wrong answer to these questions. The questions are designed to stimulate further questions that you ask yourself in order to excavate it all. And we do this by looking at our behaviors, not by looking at our thoughts and feelings, but by looking at our behaviors. That will show us the proof of our character defects. How are you behaving when in your lower self? What would it look like if I had the opposite of the shortcoming? What would be the virtue that I would aim for? This is basically the same kind of question that we used in our fear inventories. The strength or the opposite of the defect. What if I had that asset versus my fear, faith, trust, or peace? would be the opposite to the fear. And then I'd implement the behavior that this virtue would manifest. I may not be able to achieve this virtue on my own power, but I can witness what it looks like behaviorally and strive to make it part of my day's plan. And that plan would start with a connection with my higher power to ask for the removal of the defects of character. So we aren't going to do this on our own, although we have to do the footwork. Our higher power will take care of the end result, but everything leading up to the end result is in our bark. We have to do that part. We can't just sit around and think God's going to come to our house and pick us up and do everything we need them to do. It doesn't work that way. We put the work in, and the end result is in our higher power's hands. And it's always going to be that way. So we've got to do the both. We work together. And now we would be at the participant share, but as I said, the video did not record in the Zoom room. So we do not have any participant shares this week, but if you'd like to leave a note underneath at the bottom of the video, or you'd like to make a comment, we'd love to hear from you. And you're always welcome to join our group. It's an ongoing, continuous 12-step recovery workshop. All fellowships are welcome to join us, and we love having newcomers all the time that bring us fresh ideas. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again.